Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. In today's episode of Money and Medicine, I'm going to discuss the importance of setting up an emergency fund. I'm going to cover what is an emergency fund, why is it important to have an emergency fund, and how much to save in your emergency fund. I'm also going to share some valuable tips with you how to get your emergency fund started, and then also how to manage that fund per se.
This episode of Money and Medicine is proudly sponsored by the PPS Health Professions Indemnity. For more information on PPS, please do go on our website.
What is an emergency fund? What is the definition of having an emergency fund? I think the simplest way to explain this is an emergency fund is that set of cash or that secret stash of money that you have available that you can turn to in the event where you have unexpected expenses that might incur. An emergency fund is where you can go to that money and help you pay for funds that's not necessarily covered in your monthly budget. Now, why is it important to have that emergency fund? There's a number of things that can happen. For instance, if you lose your job or if your car breaks down and there's major repairs that needs to be paid for, or if you end up in the emergency room and there's any form of medical bill that needs to be paid that is not covered by your medical aid, then an emergency fund can become very handy to help you pay for that unforeseen expenses without putting financial pressure on you where you have to incur a loan or incur any form of debt that can put you financially back. I want to pause for a moment on the aspect of losing your job. This is typically the scenario that we get confronted with the most of the time by our clients, and especially after their 2 years of internship. We see it every single year where interns struggle to get a ComServe placement after they've ended their 2 years of internship. Now, we all know that getting ComServe placements currently in South Africa is a very sensitive topic. We've seen it in the media where ComServe placements get delayed every year. Those placements just happens later and later. There's a lot of uncertainty in terms of the funding that happens. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of medical doctors being left stranded without sitting with a job or without being employed for a specific amount of time. Now, the challenge that brings about is if you've got certain financial commitments, if you've been doing your 2 years internship as an example, you've got certain financial commitments. You maybe have a car installment, you have a mortgage to pay, you have rent to pay, you have certain subscriptions in terms of a cell phone maybe, in terms of Wi-Fi. There's a lot of stuff that you have to service on a monthly basis. Now, if your contract of employment all of a sudden ends and you don't know where you're going to work after that 2 years and your income has just dried up, you're put in a very difficult situation because the financial institutions who has loaned you the money to finance your car or the guy that you are renting from your property is not all of a sudden going to have pity with you and say, listen, you don't have to pay anymore. So what we typically recommend to our clients is to start early. To start early in your career in building up an emergency fund as a safety net should that happen. Currently, I am aware of 7 of my clients that did not get ComServe placements. They are currently without a job, but they still have to service their monthly obligations. Now, the big question is, how much do you need to save? We normally recommend and typically recommend saving up to about 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses. Now, your monthly expenses are hopefully less than your monthly income. You don't want to spend more than what you're earning. So if your fixed monthly expenses are roughly about 20,000 Rand a month, that might include your car repayment, your rent, it might include your medical aid, insurance products, all of your fixed expenses, groceries. If that is about 20,000 Rand a month, you typically need to save up about 120,000 Rand approximately in an emergency fund to help you continue with that lifestyle should you not get placement or should you lose your job. Now, how do we do this? Is it feasible to do it? And when do we need to start? I think the best way to set up an emergency fund is typically to open a money market account with your bank. We normally recommend a money market account because it's the most liquid account. It's an account that is linked to your checking and savings account. It's easy to transfer money from that money market account to your checking or savings account with the click of a button by just logging in on your banking app, and it's instant. So there's no specific waiting periods that you have to apply for. It's quick, it's convenient to do that. Now, to save 120,000 Rand in a period of, let's call it 2 years, it's going to take a very strong commitment. If you have to break that down, it's about 5,000 Rand a month that you will have to save in an emergency fund to carry yourself for that 6 months. And why do I say 6 months? Because typically ComServe placements happen either as we know, in the beginning of January. Some of them can be delayed to the end of the first rotation, which can be in April. That's why, if that is the case, if you are fortunate, and that's the case, you just need 3 months of savings. But we've seen in the majority of cases, guys normally get placed in July. So that's why you have to build up about 6 months of savings should you lose your job. Now, that savings can also be tailored downwards or it can be tailored upwards. And that's all dependent on a number of factors. And I've made a list of those factors that I want to share with you. You can bring your savings in your emergency fund down if you have an alternative solution. So let's say, for an example, you are able to move in with a family member. If you are currently renting on your own and there's an opportunity for you to go stay with your parents again, as an example, you can save on rent. So then you don't have to save exactly the same amount as your monthly savings. It also depends on how many financial dependents you have. If you don't have any financial dependents, you can also bring that down a bit. And also, what other policies do you have in place? Now, in the event of you ending up in the emergency room and there's unforeseen medical expenses, if you've got insurance benefits that can pay for a dreaded disease or a disability cover or an income protection policy, then we can also bring down the emergency fund savings quite significantly. Now, when do you need to save more? You have to save more if you don't have any insurance products, or if you can't stay with any person during that period. So if there's not an opportunity for you to move in with parents, or there's not an opportunity for you to move in with a friend, then you have to stay a little bit more, because you would still have to rent your own place and you still have to look after yourself. And if you've got financial dependence, so if you've got a family member or children that's financially dependent on you, it's of utmost importance that we make provision for them. Because can you just imagine your income drying up, then you have to be confronted with a situation where you can't put food on the table. We don't want that. So we have to plan adequately to make sure that you've got enough funds in your account to make for those provisions. Now, what is the best way and what are clever ways that we can use to build up this emergency fund without having to necessarily save 5,000 Rand a month, as an example? One of the fundamental tips in terms of doing that is to use your tax return. Okay, so all of us who are income earners have to submit a tax return every year. Normally it happens in October, August, September. And if you haven't watched our episode on submitting your tax returns, I really want to encourage you to go to the link that appears on the screen to go listen to the episode where we talk about submitting your tax returns. Now, a tax return, in short, is a refund that SARS pays to you back every year, depending on how your portfolio has been structured. And it's a great way to use that refund as a lump sum investment, investing it into your emergency fund. Okay. Then, to start off, where do you start in terms of doing this emergency fund? I think the best way to do it is to automate your savings. It's a great way to go and to say that if I want to save a specific amount of money every month, I'm going to automate that saving. So as soon as my income pays into my account, there's a debit order that goes off automatically from my check account into my emergency fund, and I know that's done and dusted. There won't be any temptation for you to use that money on anything else that is not carry, or that does not carry the same importance as setting up this particular fund. Another great tip in terms of setting up the emergency fund is also to get an accountability partner, to discuss with someone and to get a friend and talk to them and say, listen, why are we doing this? And talking to them when there's temptation not to save that money on a monthly basis. And the great thing that I've seen in my personal life is to cut down on subscription. Subscription fees takes a tremendous amount of money every month. It's quickly to subscribe to an app or to Netflix or to any streaming media and just pay 50 Rand or 100 Rand a month. And before you know it, all of that ends up to a significant amount of money that you are paying to subscriptions that you don't necessarily use. So I want to encourage you to review your financial plan, to review your cash flow situation and see what are you subscribing to. And if you haven't set up an emergency fund, I really want to encourage you to start considering it. You don't have to start big, start small. Anything is better than nothing. And let's get it going. If you want to reach out to us in terms of getting more guidelines, I want to encourage you to go to our website and talk to either myself or to Stefan, my partner, and we can put you in touch with the correct people that will be able to facilitate you in getting this started. I want to thank you for your time, and if you find value in this episode, please feel free to share it with your colleagues and friends. And until next time, plan the plan.